There's no rule that says you must lug it around all day. And yet, you hold on to it as if it were essential to your life. Strangely enough. Then there's, I must protect my image, smooth but heavy, making every gesture and every word feel calculated and tense. The ego is that backpack. You take it everywhere, into your workplace. You no longer realize how much it weighs you down. The Buddha once taught, we suffer not because the world binds us, but because we bind ourselves. The backpack of stones is that invisible chain. It doesn't exist out there in the world, it's born from your own clinging, your desire to prove yourself, your fear of being ignored or seen as less. Some days, the backpack feels twice as heavy. Whenever someone says something you dislike, you slip in a stone labeled, I'm offended. When you see someone more successful, you add, I can't lose. When your efforts go unnoticed, you toss in, I need recognition. Over time, these stones pile up, slowing your steps, shortening your breath, and dimming the innocent light in your eyes. But if you look closely, you'll see a truth. No one else is putting those stones in your backpack, you are. And no one is forcing you to keep carrying them, you could set them down at any moment. The question is, do you have the courage to let them go? In meditation, teachers often invite students to look inward and ask, what am I carrying on my shoulders? But because you stop clutching them so tightly. Some people ask, but if I let go of these stones, will I still be myself? This is the hidden fear that keeps many from loosening their grip. They mistake the ego for their true self. But just like setting down a backpack, you don't disappear, you simply feel lighter, freer. The ego is just a shell, your true nature can never be lost. When you put down the backpack of stones, the world stays the same, but you see it through different eyes. Arguments are no longer battlefields to defend your pride. Success or failure no longer define your worth. Other people's opinions are no longer the only mirror reflecting who you are. And that's when you truly begin to live, not to be better or maintain an image, but to experience each moment with peace in your heart. The Buddhist path doesn't demand that you smash the ego in a single day. It simply invites you to set the backpack down for a while, to taste the lightness for yourself. Then you'll realize, none of those stones are truly needed for the journey back to who you really are. And maybe one day, you'll smile at the discovery that you've come so far, not because you carried more, but because you carried less. Ego, the dangerous companion. The ego never leaves. It's always there, like a familiar companion you've carried for as long as you can remember. You may not hear its voice clearly, but it's constantly whispering. Careful. They're watching you. You can't afford to lose. You need to prove you're worthy. At first, these whispers sound protective, like a friend warning you about danger. Or a loyal bodyguard standing by your side. But if you look closer, you'll see it's not protection at all, it's a cage. A cage made of fear of judgment, fear of losing, fear of being hurt. And it keeps you in a constant state of defense. The ego is like someone who hands you a shield but also builds a fence of thorns around you. It doesn't show you the open sky. It only shows you the threats it believes you must prepare for. It tells you, without this armor, you'll be wounded. But that very armor prevents you from touching the world with your bare, unguarded heart. In Buddhist teachings, the ego is called self-clinging, the attachment to the idea of me and everything connected to me. The stronger this clinging, the more sensitive you become to every bump in life. A casual comment can feel like an arrow aimed at you. Someone else's success can feel like a shadow threatening your place. You start to see the world through a distorted lens where everything somehow revolves around you, and that is exhausting. The ego's danger lies in its ability to disguise itself. It can even turn spiritual practice into a competition. I meditate better than them, I understand the Dharma more deeply than others. The very path meant to free you becomes yet another playground where the ego grows stronger. Some compare the ego to a snake. It doesn't always strike right away. Often it lies coiled in the corner. Still and quiet, making you believe it's been tamed. But all it takes is a trigger, a harsh word, a dismissive glance, an unexpected failure, and it rears up to spit venom. That venom is anger, jealousy, fear, and the deep sense of being hurt. In the Buddha's teaching, the most dangerous thing about the ego isn't that it exists, it's that we fail to see it. It's like traveling with a dangerous guide but thinking you're walking alone. You believe your choices are all free will, when in reality, they're shaped by this subtle voice inside. Recognizing the ego is not about hating it, it's about understanding that it is not you. It's just a part of the mind, a mechanism that arose to protect you but unintentionally holds you prisoner. When you start observing its voice with mindfulness, you see it like a passing cloud. It might block the sun for a moment, but it can't erase the sky. When the ego is in control, you live in duality. Me versus others, winning versus losing, gaining versus losing, loving versus hating. But when you take a step back, watch it without immediately believing everything it says, you start to discover a much larger space, where those divisions begin to dissolve. On the path of practice, you won't kill the ego in one day. It will keep whispering, keep trying to take the wheel. But each time you notice, that's the ego speaking, you've already taken one step out of its invisible cage. You start to know when to listen, and when to simply smile and let it fade. The ego may still walk beside you for a long stretch of the journey. But instead of letting it lead you by the hand, you can let it trail behind, like a child still muttering its own fears, while you move forward, lighter, freer, and steadier than ever before. And as your awareness deepens, you'll realize you no longer need that companion. Because when you're no longer bound by the ego, you finally meet the world, not with suspicion or defense, but with clear eyes and a fearless heart. How the ego steals every moment. The ego is a skilled thief. It doesn't break in loudly or smash through the door. It slips in quietly, almost invisibly, and takes away the most precious thing you have, the life unfolding right now. You may think you're living in the moment, but in truth, you're just watching a film the ego has written, directed. But instead of savoring the taste, you're thinking, how do I look while eating? Am I making a good impression? Should I say something clever so people will notice me? Crafting responses that will sound smarter or more impressive. You're not listening to understand, you're listening to reply, to score points. The genuine connection that could have been shared is lost, replaced by an exchange between two egos rather than two human beings. You're walking on a beautiful afternoon. You reach for your phone to take a photo, not to remember the moment, but to post it online and see how many likes you get, how many compliments you receive. The beauty of nature is no longer a gift, it becomes a prop for your ego's image. The ego steals the moment by pulling you out of the present. It drags you into the world of, what will they think? How can I make this better? How do I make sure I'm not less than someone else? You stop living from the inside out, covering up the true one. When you live in this illusion, you're always in a role, the successful one, the knowledgeable one, the interesting one. No matter how perfect the role, it's still not you. And because it's not real, it constantly needs defending, polishing, and protecting, leaving you perpetually tired. The danger is, the ego doesn't just steal ordinary moments, it steals the most beautiful ones. A compliment becomes a stone labeled, I must maintain this image. A success turns into, I can't ever fail. A loving relationship shifts into, I must be loved exactly this way. What was once a gift becomes a burden simply because the ego slipped in and claimed ownership. When the ego is running the show, you live as if there's an invisible camera on you at all times. Every action, every word, every expression is adjusted to look good on film. But life is not a movie. Wash the dishes when you wash the dishes. In other words, when you eat, just eat. When you talk, just talk. When you walk, just walk. The ego doesn't like this, because if you're fully in the present, It has no stage to stand on. But that is exactly how you reclaim the moments the ego has stolen. Here's a simple practice. Whenever you notice yourself performing in your mind, pause. Without you needing to embellish or prove anything. When you're fully in the moment, fear, comparison, and judgment fade. You become part of the natural flow of life, where everything is already complete, already enough. The ego may still whisper, but its voice will no longer matter. Because you'll be truly living, not as a role to be played, but as a free human being. Why the ego hates peace? Peace is the enemy of the ego. Because the moment you are truly still, the ego begins to lose its grip. The ego thrives on noise, on the endless chatter of me versus them, of I must win, and they must lose. It feeds on drama, on conflict. The ego fears stillness because stillness is awareness, and awareness sees through its illusions. Think about it, when you are at peace, you no longer need to defend an image of yourself. It will try to pull you back into the storm. Maybe through a sudden memory of someone who wronged you years ago. Maybe through comparing your life to someone else's. Maybe through inventing a story about why you should feel offended, insecure, or superior. The ego doesn't care if the story is true, it only cares that you keep identifying with it. Because it needs constant separation and tension to define itself. So when you feel the ego stirring up drama, pause. Breathe. See it for what it is, a frightened voice that only survives in chaos. The more you rest in stillness, the weaker it becomes. And one day, you may discover that peace was never something you had to fight for. It was always here, quietly waiting beneath the noise. Signs you're clinging to the ego without realizing it. You feel a wave of irritation when someone ignores you. You can't help but measure yourself against others. You feel a constant need to prove your worth. At first glance, these reactions seem normal, just part of being human. But in the light of Buddhist wisdom, they reveal something deeper. The subtle grip of the ego on your mind. The ego thrives on comparison, recognition, and validation. It's like a shadow that quietly follows you, influencing every step without you noticing. When someone ignores you, the ego whispers, "See? They don't respect you. You should remind them of your importance." When you compare yourself to others, it feeds you stories, you're better than them or you're not good enough. Either way, it keeps you trapped in the same cycle, chasing approval, fearing rejection. From a Buddhist perspective, this is attachment in disguise. The mind becomes tangled in the illusion that your worth depends on how others see you. But true worth is not given or taken by the world, it is your natural state. Untouched and unshaken. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. When we cling to the ego's image, the idea of me that must be protected and enhanced, we're like a person holding a burning coal, thinking it will keep us warm. Not realizing it's what's burning us. The practice, then, is awareness. Notice when irritation, comparison, or the urge to prove yourself arises. Instead of automatically reacting, pause and observe. Ask yourself, who is feeling hurt right now? Who is trying to be seen? Often, you'll find it's not your true self, it's just the ego, wearing your face. Over time, as you keep observing without feeding it, the ego's grip weakens. You begin to act, not from the need to be someone, but from the freedom of simply being. And in that space, peace flows naturally. That we begin to mistake them for our identity. We say, "This is me," not realizing that what we're really clinging to is just a stream of passing thoughts. The ego thrives on these narratives. You are nothing. But here's the truth, when the story falls silent, you are still here. In fact, you're more here than ever before. You are the awareness that notices each thought rise and fade. Each emotion swell and soften. You are the space in which all experiences appear, and in that space, nothing is missing, nothing is broken. The Buddha compared it to the sky, clouds come and go. Storms may rage, but the vastness of the sky remains untouched. When you begin to observe the mind without getting lost in it, the grip of the ego weakens. It's like realizing you've been watching a movie and suddenly remembering you're sitting in a theater. You can still watch, but you no longer mistake the screen for reality. This shift can feel unsettling at first. If you've lived your whole life identifying with your story, letting go of it might feel like losing yourself. But what you lose is only the illusion. What remains is something far more real, the quiet, steady awareness that doesn't need a name, a role, or a script. And here's the liberation: when you no longer define yourself by your story. You are free to meet each moment without the weight of yesterday or the anxiety of tomorrow. You can listen without preparing your reply. You can love without calculating the risk. You are the silence in which the story is told. The sky and the clouds metaphor. The ego is like a cloud, constantly shifting, sometimes dark and heavy, sometimes light and fleeting. Always drifting across the mind's horizon. It changes shape from pride to insecurity, from anger to desire, from fear to ambition. No matter its form, it has one thing in common. It can never stay still, and it often obscures the light of your true nature. Your true self is the sky, vast, open, and unshaken by passing weather. Storm clouds may gather, lightning may flash, and winds may roar, but the sky itself is never harmed. It remains spacious, infinite, and untouched. When you identify with the clouds, life feels turbulent. Every insult, every failure, every comparison is like a storm that sweeps you away. But when you remember that you are the sky, you begin to see the clouds for what they are, temporary visitors. They may block the sun for a time, but they cannot take away the boundless expanse of who you truly are. In Buddhist practice, this is the art of resting in awareness. You stop chasing after the clouds or trying to push them away. You simply let them drift, knowing they will dissolve on their own. The ego loses its grip because it thrives on your attachment and resistance. And here's the beauty: when you live as the sky, even the clouds become beautiful. You no longer fear them, for they are simply part of the dance of existence. You see their impermanence, and in that seeing, you taste the deep peace that was always here, unchanging, spacious, and free. The 3 steps to putting the backpack down. Pause and notice when you feel that spark of irritation, that rush of defensiveness, or that sudden urge to prove yourself. Stop. Just stop. Take a breath deep enough to remind you that you are here, now. Feel the weight of your body against the chair, the rhythm of your breathing, the sensations in your hands. In that pause, you step out of the automatic grip of the ego. You reclaim a sliver of space where choice becomes possible. Shift the focus. The ego loves to keep the spotlight squarely on me. My feelings. My opinions. My wins. My losses. But when you gently turn the camera toward us, instead, something softens. You remember that the person in front of you is not your opponent, but a fellow traveler, also carrying their own invisible burdens. The moment becomes less about protecting your image and more about understanding, connecting, and helping. Release the story. Ego thrives on narratives. I'm the victim, I'm the hero, I'm the one who's right. But every story is just that, a story. When you tell yourself, I am not this story, you step into a bigger truth. You're not the label you defend, not the opinion you argue for, not the role you're playing today. You are the awareness beneath it all. And from that awareness, you can let the backpack drop, the one filled with grudges, judgments, and the constant need to be someone. Living this way doesn't mean you stop caring or become indifferent. It means you move through the world lighter, freer, and more open to what each moment is offering. When you pause, shift, and release, you stop dragging yesterday's baggage into today's sunrise. And the more often you do it, the more you realize, life feels so much better when your hands are free. The joy of no longer having to perform, There is a kind of freedom no amount of money can buy. No position of power can grant, the freedom of no longer living as a performance. For years, we've grown accustomed to wearing masks, the mask of strength, of success, of always being fine. But each mask is an invisible chain, quietly binding the heart. In the Buddha's teaching, this performance is a reflection of self-clinging, the ego's constant need to be seen, praised, and protected within the image it creates. Yet as long as we perform, the mind can never truly rest. It stays on guard, anxious about the moment someone might see through the image we've built. It's a deep, hidden exhaustion, one that comes from within. When we look deeply into the nature of the self, we see that every role is impermanent. The me of today is not the me of tomorrow. Today's praise may turn into tomorrow's criticism. The wise do not chase after these ever-changing masks. They return to their true nature, unembellished and uncontrived. Like a clear river, undisturbed by mud, naturally reflecting the sky, the mind too becomes clear when it is no longer driven by ego. Thoughts, words, and actions flow naturally, free from the subtle scent of pretense. In this place, happiness is no longer something we chase outside ourselves. It radiates effortlessly, like the fragrance of a flower. One who no longer performs doesn't need to prove their worth or worry about how others see them, because they know. True value doesn't live in the eyes of the world, it lives in the stillness and clarity of the heart. The Buddha once said, "When the mind is pure, the world is pure. When the mind stops acting, all suffering born from comparison, competition, and fear dissolves. Every step, every breath becomes a simple joy, a joy no one can take away, because it does not come from outside, but from the freedom within." Conclusion: a journey as light as the clouds. Life becomes lighter the very moment you set down the weight of the ego. It's like taking off a heavy backpack you didn't even realize you were carrying. Suddenly, the air feels fresher, your steps feel freer, and even the smallest things sparkle with life. I invite you to try something simple yet profoundly transformative. For the next 24 hours, live as if you had no ego. That doesn't mean you erase your personality or deny your needs. It means you move through the day without constantly defending me, without chasing validation, without making every event about your story. Just notice what happens when you let go of that inner narrator who always wants to control, compare, or complain. You may discover that conversations become more genuine because you're not waiting for your turn to speak, you're truly listening. Tasks feel lighter because you're not burdened by thoughts of, "What will people think?" Conflicts lose their sting because you're not clinging to the need to be right. Even the quiet moments, sipping tea, watching the clouds drift, hearing the sound of rain, feel fuller, because you're not rushing to label or judge them. The Buddha often compared the mind free of clinging to a clear sky, vast, open, and untouched by passing clouds. Our ego is like those clouds, it can obscure the view, but it never changes the boundless space behind them. When you drop the ego, even for a day, you get a glimpse of that infinite sky within you, your true nature. So try it. Live one day without the weight of "I" on your shoulders. Move gently, speak kindly, listen deeply. Let the winds of life pass through without resistance. And at the end of that day, reflect. Was life lighter? Was your heart freer? Did you feel closer to peace? If even a small shift happens, remember, this freedom has always been here. The ego only made you believe it had to be earned or fought for. In truth, it was waiting quietly beneath the noise all along. Subscribe to this channel. And let's keep walking this path together, the path toward inner liberation, where we learn to live, love, and let go like the passing clouds.